Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm honored to welcome each and every one of you here today for the German-Lebanese Forum on Cooperation and Development.
It is my great pleasure to welcome you all to our Forum on German-Lebanese Cooperation and Development. I'm very, very happy, I have to say, to see so many stakeholders and practitioners of the German-Lebanese relationship here joining us today. In this context, I'm also particularly pleased to welcome our guests from Germany, members of parliament, mayors, representatives from municipalities, from the private sector, academia, and international cooperation, who join us for this event today and who also have a very busy program, as I may say, ahead of them for their stay here in Lebanon. Our mission as Konrad Adenauer-Stiftung is to build bridges, to connect stakeholders, to promote dialogue and international cooperation. And I hope that we can contribute to these objectives together with you today with this event. I don't want to paint a rosy picture of the situation in the country. I think we all know and we all are aware how big the socio-economic challenges and in particular also the political and the governance challenges Lebanon is being faced with are. And we will discuss this in the coming sessions as well. However, ladies and gentlemen, it is a concern for me and for us as Konrad Adenauer-Stiftung to not only focus on problems, describe them, and then leave it there. No, we would like to also identify approaches that we can take together with you to bring about a change on a small or on a larger scale for the better.
Next, it is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Paul Ziemiak, member of the German Parliament, who came when he was 18 years old to Lebanon. And now he is the chairman of the German-Lebanese Parliamentary Circle.
And so I'm very happy that we are here together on this conference organized by the Konrad Adenauer Foundation. Ladies and gentlemen, so some people asking maybe you, they ask me in Germany, why are you going for a conference to Lebanon when the situation is so complicated? That what you are focusing in the economy, in the bank sector, also in politics, this is not anymore a crisis, this is a catastrophe, we see. Why you're going to do this conference? Yes, that's the answer. This is the reason why we have to check what we can do and to start and not to think it's not possible. We don't have to discuss what is not possible. We have to speak about that, what is possible. And I believe in things I have not seen, because this is our job as politicians to make the world a little bit better. And not only for our own country, not only for our own continent. This is our closest neighborhood of the European Union. And this is our own interest as Europeans and Germans to work together and have stability in the region. So when I was born in 1985, far away behind the Iron Curtain in Poland, Europe was divided in the West and the Ost bloc. And my parents came to Germany 3 years later in 1988 because they saw no perspective in their own country. They said they'd make no sense. The wall in Berlin will be there forever. And there will be no freedom of speech and so on in Poland. So they left the country. Only 1 year later, the wall came down in Berlin, and Germany, 1 year later, in Germany and Europe was reunited. Believe in things you have not seen. So everything is possible when we work hard on it and not only say, Inshallah, it's good to believe, but God gave us the possibility to change something as humans. So with courage, confidence, trust, and heart, together we can make, maybe from this conference, we can make the difference. And I believe in this country, As I said, I came the first time when I was 18 years old as a volunteer to make a camp for disabled Lebanese children up in the mountains in Faraya, Shabrouk. I took care as a volunteer on these children. And I fall in love like all the other guys in Lebanon. And I came back and again as politician later. Now we founded the German Lebanese Parliamentary Circle in the German Bundestag. The head of the Green Party in Germany, Omid Nouripur, the Secretary of State, Niels Annen, and me, we are the chairs, and we found it, and there came so many parliamentarians to the first meeting. So we believe in the country.
Thank you, Mr. Ziemiak. Our first panel, moderated by Ms. Daizy, will provide us with an overview of the current situation. I would like to welcome on stage His Excellency Dr. Nasser Yassin, His Excellency Mr. Ziad Baroud, Mr. Salim Zeenni, and Ms. Daizy.
First of all, I would like to take this opportunity to thank Michael Bauer and Kaz for this opportunity to lead this first session. It's a great honor. Thank you, gentlemen, for allowing me to moderate this discussion. His Excellency Dr. Nasser Yassin. His Excellency is the current Minister of Environment of the Republic of Lebanon. Before his appointment in 2021, he was a Professor of Public Policy and Planning at the American University of Beirut. My next guest is Dr. Ziad Baroud. You're the former Minister of Interior and Municipalities, as which you served from 2008 to 2011. And finally, I'd like to introduce Mr. Salim Zeenni. Welcome, sir. President of the Association of Lebanese Industrialists. You also serve as Vice President of the Chemical Industry Syndicate and President of the American Lebanese Chamber of Commerce. I'm going to get directly into this discussion because we want to give you as much time as possible to ask your questions, but there are formative questions that we would like to begin the discussion with. And I'd like to start with you, Excellency Yassin.
Thank you.
Since the parliamentary elections in May 2022, the current government has been in caretaker mode with limited powers. Could you clarify briefly what this current Lebanese government can and cannot do? For instance, is the current caretaker government able to draft a reform package and conclude a deal with the IMF? Does it have the necessary authority? Does it require emergency powers, and what does that mean?
You know, since 2008, so for the past 15 years or so, I think the norm has been to be a caretaker government. And of course, this is not a good sign. This is a sign of how the system in Lebanon has become so complex to allow us to govern properly. And as a matter of fact, this is also happening in other nations, but it's more vivid and more clear in Lebanon, affecting every facet in life in Lebanon. That has to do with the constitutional system, that has to do with the more and more practices that deal with the veto power or vetocracy, as we say it, that each community and group has a veto power or veto power to policies in Lebanon. So said that, as a caretaker government, from the narrow sense of the word, we have to keep things going. We have to manage the everyday affairs of citizens and state in a proper manner. I think it's our moral obligation to keep going, but definitely we need to put the institutions back on their feet, back on track. I mean, that's the key, you know.
Excuse me, just there's no doubt that's your responsibility, but what powers do you have as a caretaker government? What ability do you have right now to do that?
I was just
getting there, sorry.
That's the background of the... So, you know, I mean, of course, we cannot do, we cannot, work on legislations. When we meet as a Council of Ministers, although contested by other, by politicians and some groups, but when we meet, we have to keep it to the everyday, management of the affairs of the state. And we keep actually managing our own duty as ministers, as the Constitution says, that every and each minister has to run their own ministry and keep it going. I mean, I'm putting it simply.
I'm going to interrupt you again. Sorry.
These words. No, let me continue. But given the urgency of the state in Lebanon, of the state of affairs, of the economy, of the collapsing institutions, we have to even work and be more liberal in the way we explain and in the way we practice caretaking. We cannot actually keep it to the very, very narrow sense of caretaking. Otherwise, the whole nation will just, collapse.
Of course.
So it is a technical question in this sense, but it's a very more political question when it comes to how to deal and how to manage those affairs in such a very critical moment in Lebanon.
Okay, just yes or no. Can you sign off on the IMF deal as a caretaker government?
The IMF deal has to go to Parliament. It's blocked in the Parliament. It's not in the Council of Ministers. The Parliament also has been less active since we have a vacuum in the presidency for the many reasons, including the political reasons for that. I fully understand. But there are acts and there are issues to be discussed in Parliament, and this is where we need to push. And that was my point, where we need to support the parliamentarians in fulfilling their vocation. They need to do it to the fullest sense of actually engaging with this reform, rather than being a congregation of minority blocks in Parliament. We need to push them to be responsible for issuing some of the reform that's much needed. I'm not putting the ball on I'm not throwing the hot potato to the Parliament, but many things are blocked now in Parliament.
And that just gives me a lead into my final point to you, is about the presidential vacuum, the impact of the presidential vacuum and the ramifications not only on the country but on governance of Lebanon, but on your ability as a minister and the rest of those ministers in cabinet to be able to fulfill their duties. You just mentioned, the Parliament getting back to work and doing what they need to do. Where do you stand on the current vacuum, the power vacuum in the presidential, for the president?
Many would argue that the president in Lebanon is more symbolic or ceremonial position, but I would argue against. The president of Lebanon is a head of state. He might not have the powers he had before the Taif agreement, but as a head of state, he has the full power to steer the country in the direction that we need to. He has actually the representative power as being president elected by the parliament to lead and to govern sometimes the Council of Ministers, and of course to be the figurehead and symbol of the unity of the state. I mean, that's how we need to see it. That's why we need to start from that position, and we need to be very serious about electing a president, as we say today, rather than tomorrow. And this is where we need to dialogue with all the Lebanese factions and groups and parties to go together to the parliament and do their duty. There's a symbolic move in parliament by MPs that some would say it's folkloric, but as a matter of fact, I think it's deep in its meaning, because parliamentarians need to fulfill their duty and elect a president as soon as possible. As a head of state, as the symbol of the country, as someone who can steer the reform in the direction rather than be more factional as a president. And this is actually more, again, I'm going to go back to the political discussion. The president of Lebanon shouldn't be seen as someone who comes to represent a group or a party. And this is the gravest mistake we did in Lebanon for the past few years. The president of Lebanon should be above all of this to be the right person to go for whenever there are some challenges in Lebanon, whenever there is dispute in Lebanon, not actually to be part of this dispute or part of, the vested interests that politicians and political groups have.
I'm going to move on, but thank you very much for that clarification. I'm going to move to His Excellency Ziad Baroud for my next question. You're the former Minister of the Interior and Municipalities from 2008 to 2011. And with municipal elections only 2 months away, we hope that they will proceed. We'd like to ask for your opinion on how the current political paralysis, as we just mentioned, and the past 3 years of economic crisis are impacting municipalities in delivering public services to their communities, and what you consider the greatest threat to the socio-economic development and progress of these communities.
Thank you, Daisy. First, I have to declare publicly that it's my loss to have missed your interview.
Thank you. Thank you.
This being said, back to your question, I think that mayors who are here with us would tell you a lot about how difficult for them it has been to really deal with daily business and to offer services to their communities. This is not only due to the fact that elections were postponed. It's mainly due to the fact that the economic crisis has hit the municipalities in a way that they cannot anymore deliver the services at the cost of today, but with the Lebanese pounds of 3 years ago. So their budget is almost zero. I mean, it's nothing compared to the cost of services today. You cannot impose new taxes, and at the same time, they have to deliver, and they cannot. So I think that many mayors who are today in office, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, they wouldn't run again for May 2023 because they believe that they can do nothing. At the same time,
Keeping them for the next
I have concerns and fears about municipal elections being postponed again. And we have a very bad track record in this regard. So I have fears and concerns because, you know, it's easier for mostly political groups to say, well, this is not the good time. We're not fine with it.
What would be the threat to them?
What would be?
The threat to the political parties?
I think that they look at the results in terms of representation, and many have lost their constituencies in a way that they think, well, let's postpone. So if we postpone again, it's a very bad signal. We had parliamentary elections in 2022. I don't see why we wouldn't have municipal elections. I'm only saying I'm concerned. I'm not saying that they won't happen, but I have, legitimate concerns. And I believe, like His Excellency mentioned, I believe that the political class, ruling class, has a lot to say about to people in terms of accountability, in terms of how do we see the near future, because the crisis is here and it will remain for a couple of, I don't know, months, years, hopefully not many years, and people need to get answers.
And what is the threat right now, and what are you seeing? What are the mayors seeing right now in those municipalities? That is, you've mentioned that they don't have the money to support or fulfill public service.
Yeah, it's mainly the money.
How do we visualize what you're talking about?
It's mainly the resources, money, and human resources, because many are leaving. Many are leaving not only the country, but they are leaving the public sector to go to the private sector because their salaries are becoming really ridiculous. Sometimes it's $20 per month. So this is ridiculous. They cannot keep on doing business as usual. The threats are also in terms of not only in the relation between municipalities and central government, because municipalities are so far the only decentralized bodies, but they have to deal with central government bodies as well, which are on strike, or you go to any administration, any public administration, they would tell you, well, we're here once a week, once a week. It's you understand that they cannot pay. They cannot.
To the staff.
They cannot come to their work.
Transportation
has become really
expensive.
Hugely expensive.
We'll get back into it a little bit later. I'd like to go to Mr. Zeenni. Welcome, sir. You come at it in a very different angle, so we're very excited to have you in the middle of the gentlemen on either side of you. We are soberly cognizant of the far-reaching failure of the public sector to fulfill its duties to the citizens of Lebanon due to the aforementioned political crisis and those mentioned by both excellencies this morning just now. It's not only current, but it's also a result of the intransigence and lack of genuine will of the major political parties ruling the country to comply with their constitutional responsibilities and pass legislation and take decisions to avoid further disintegration of the economy. It appears the only thing preventing the country from falling into complete economic, political and social failure is the private sector, as well as the billions of dollars that are being sent by the diaspora back to their families, amounting to approximately 40% of GDP. Based on these factors, how essential is the private sector to halting or at least slowing the pace of further economic decline and to driving economic recovery in the country? And please provide it from your insight on the current state of the private sector in Lebanon.
Thank you, Daizy. Well, it's a big subject first, but let me approach it from different angles. Because let's begin by the industry in Lebanon. I think this is the only sector that could survive the economic crash, the problems that we are facing now for the last 3-4 years, and for a good reason. First of all, and here I don't want to talk poetry, but definitely the resilience of the Lebanese people and the industrialists is behind that the country did not really collapse totally. Unfortunately, the state has collapsed. If we didn't have some left good people in places like Minister Yassin, I'm not talking in front of him, we don't know each other. But we still have good people trying to survive, to make the public sector survive. But what could they do, actually? Our job as private sector, as industrialists, is to preserve first our assets and our people. We employ around 240,000 people in the sector. You know that we barely lost 1 or 2% of our total manpower during this crisis. The people working in the industrial sector, we could survive with them. It's not only for them and for us also, but we could survive with them because we gave a lot of sacrifices from ourselves. They believe in it. If they didn't believe, they would have left from the day one. Actually, these sectors, in fact, we are not the only sector that could bring back the country back into on its feet. But Lebanese in general, and industry, and trade, and tourism, and hospitality, and health industry, they are all back into work as much as possible differently. But if there is a driver behind them, it is the industry, actually. We are exporting. We are replacing the imports at a good level, actually. We are still investing in our sector and giving employments to the people here in Lebanon to keep them here. So the problem, in fact, is not here. The private sector, if we empower the private sector, we can bring the country back on its feet. And I know what I'm talking about. But unfortunately, the public sector is pulling us back with all the hesitations and the system that is prevailing, actually. It doesn't let you go on, advance. Even though they should have learned from this crisis to approach all the problems actually differently. You cannot solve a problem in 2022 or 23 like they used to solve it in 1943 when we had the independence. Our problem, in fact, sorry?
We're nostalgic.
Yeah, but we had the best times. The industry before 1975, we were the only industrial country in the whole region, including good part of the Southeast Asia. So the problem is how to put the policies and how to run the country. Putting policies is not refraining people from work. It's just, it has to be just the contrary. We should encourage people to be creative, innovative, and work. What is happening in Lebanon, all the laws that are done to control more and more the situation in the private sector. Because they are afraid of letting the people go, of letting them do business. They are afraid of, unfortunately, of the incompetence of part of the public sector who don't know how to react except by ruling and by controlling. Now we are facing, actually, if you want, what are our problems actually?
Yes,
And
specifically.
if you want me to
And not
tackle
too
this
long,
problem.
if you don't mind, if
Please.
you can this little way.
Now they are putting us in a corner in a way. We are putting taxes, we are putting all the regulations which should exist. I'm not saying no, but you cannot control 30% of the economy and let the 70% be on its own as an informal economy. This is either you control everybody or you give us at least the chance to compete. You cannot put all the burden of bringing the salaries. The salaries, sometime I don't want to englobe everybody, but a good part of it is for people who don't do anything. Just getting their salary at the end of the month. So definitely we should give us the tools to compete with the informal economy. And let them do it, let them us go, and they will see that we will do it so easily. Give us the same opportunity. Now you are putting taxes, custom duties. You take the taxes from us, put it in one big box, and from there you pay all the salaries. You cannot pay salaries out of taxation. Taxation is made to make a regulation of life here and to create growth. It's not made only to pay salaries. You pay salaries from the services that you are offering to the people. From electricity, from communication, from ports, from airports, from all this.
Thank you, sir.
This is how you pay the salary.
Thank you, sir. And because we're going to get too deep into the political melee that has resulted in Lebanon being where it is, but it is important that you mentioned specifically what is the burden on the private sector and how, again, it is underwriting and being required to underpin, to pay everything else, as well as money that comes in from the diaspora. This is the only way that Lebanon is actually functioning and still existing today. But you're right, it's an unfair burden, and we'll come back to it. But I want to lead into right now from what you were talking about, the point that, since I launched my film in 2021, I've been asked to speak at conferences, and obviously my documentary focused on the dysfunction and the corruption and the state of the country. But I've been asked to speak about at World Humanitarian Drive Trade for Peace summits because, as Paul mentioned, we have to look at the possibilities, the opportunities, look at it and see what can be done, not always look at what is happening and look at the negative. And I have often tried to steer the conversation in that direction to look at the opportunities that do exist in Lebanon. And I travel around the country, and I'm here now permanently, and I see tremendous opportunity. And what I wanted to ask you all, from each of your perspectives, what do you see as the possibilities and opportunities that exist for governments like Germany, for international organizations and businesses, and for individuals, wealthy individuals who might want to invest in Lebanon? It's a very risky, investment, but do you see that as a way of trying to reignite and restart the economy, and how could those relationships work? And I'd like to start with you, Mr. Zeenni, if you can, but please keep it brief.
In fact, you are tackling the point with a representative of the most important country if we want to revive the economy in Lebanon. The German model has always been an ideal model for us to copy. It is a successful model in a way that during all the past few years, they were the only ones to survive the crisis, the global crisis. Yes, there is a lot to do with our partners. One of the most important things is to empower the private sector. Stop interfering, and we can do a lot. We can work with the Germans with their experience in industry, in trade, in regulations, quality control, and this is one of the major things that will help us in exporting more and more outside Lebanon and bringing in more currencies, foreign currencies. By the way, we exported last year for around $4 billion of goods, Lebanese goods, though the Saudi Arabia and Egypt were nearly closed for us because of some sorry to say the word, but I cannot.
I'm sorry,
no
Mr.
other
Zeenni.
way.
I'm going to interrupt you because I want to be specific about what those opportunities look like. What do those relationships look like? What areas of business can you present to the audience that they can get involved with and allows for it right now? Does the legislation allow for them to be involved directly with private sector? I want to be specific because we can talk about the problems.
Definitely. A lot of businesses, I cannot confine it into one or two sectors. At least from the German side, they have been doing a very good job with the vocational training, for example. This is one of the bases of the to have a good manufacturing processes. So which they spent huge amounts of money, nothing came out, unfortunately, because they were working with the public sector. Actually, we are trying to cooperate with the public sector for vocational training, and that's something we can work with the German, and I think either with Konrad Adenauer, or with GIZ, or with other different bodies in Germany. We can work a lot on this. We can work on promoting the Lebanese products. We can work on bringing the tourism sector, which is a milestone corner for the whole economy.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I'm going to pass it on to His Excellency, Mr. Ziad Baroud. Where do you see that opportunity and possibility in the municipalities, in government, from your perspective?
Well, first, we have to say enough. In your movie, you tell us that Lebanon stands as an allegory for kleptocratic regimes. So this has to stop, and we need to start a new page. Now, the cooperation between Lebanon and Germany is historical. It's not new. It's something we've been going through for decades now. And I believe that the cooperation with the central government is one thing, and the cooperation with civil society groups at large is something else. And I know for a fact how deep it is, how sustainable it is, and we need to keep doing this. But I don't like much the word resilience. Resilience has become, for me, a bad word. It means that we adapt to everything. We're okay with everything. It takes time. Yes, okay, it takes time. We do nothing. We're waiting for something. We don't know what if it would come or not. En attendant Godot. So it's something we need to stop and say enough as well. Now, what needs to be done is what is being done already, in-kind contribution. I don't like financial support, especially when it comes to the government. It should be more about projects. It should be projects based and oriented, and the European Union has been doing this for years, and in particular Germany. Municipalities have also some sort of bilateral agreements with German foundation like Konrad, and I know that it's really impacting positively the needs of local, especially that, you know, since the Syrian crisis, we've been going through this comparison between why the international community is supporting Syrian refugees and ignoring hosting communities, which has changed actually in the last couple of years. At the beginning, it was an issue. People were unhappy about it. Now it's you know, donors are taking into consideration the fact that hosting communities need to be looked at as well.
Thank you. Excellency, I pass it on to you, and just frame it in relation to the German-Lebanon cooperation, and but specifically from what can happen with your ministry.
Yeah, I'm going to answer this, but let me respond to Mr. Zeenni, whom I admire a lot, and of course his drive towards keeping the industry. You know, Lebanon has the widest and largest inequality, perhaps in the world. You know, so I have the figures. 1% of the population share 35% of the wealth, and 50% of the population share only 5% of the wealth, and that's before the crisis. Secondly, of course, there's a good private sector whom we admire and respect and we need to support, but there's also a private sector in Lebanon that had been used to easy money, easy loans, easy access to circles of power, lack of regulation, environmental externalities put on the community, and we need to face this. We support private sector, but we need to support genuine private sector that looks at itself in the mirror and faces their demons. And we have to be serious about that. It's not state against private sector. The private sector needs to also respond to their responsibilities and really actually look at what they did. From the banking sector and down the line. The banking sector need to look at their demons and face it, because they contributed significantly to the current crash and collapse. And we have to face it. It's not state versus the banking, it's together. Secondly, there's no country on earth that cannot regulate the private sector and any other sector. We need regulation. We need to put environmental regulation. We need to put taxation in order to fulfill our duties in terms of the redistribution nature of the taxation system that has been skewed for many years. There's a skewed redistribution system in Lebanon that we need to face it and do more tax justice in the country. These are the realities. So excuse me, it's not state taking the money for those lazy employees sitting there. No, the state, there is issues in the public sector. We all acknowledge them. We need to work on them. But also the private sector need to understand that the age of that they used to do in the past many years need to change if we want to build a sustainable path for the country. But let me answer you on the environment and the need to invest in the environment. The environment in Lebanon and green economy in particular can be the most rewarding sector if we want to invest and look at it. Investing in renewable energy has been perhaps fast growing, not because of the state regulation, because of the lack of actually management of the electricity sector, but this is a sector that we want to invest further in We launched in the Ministry of Environment the Lebanon Green Investment Facility, a facility that encourages investment in the green economy, renewable, sustainable agriculture, sustainable transport. Each dollar we put in the environment has the fastest and the highest reward if we look at it in this way. If we invest $1 in our nature reserves, and we did this with Konrad Adenauer in the past few weeks and actually last year, each dollar invested in protecting our environment gives $19 in terms of reward, directly and indirectly. So we need also to encourage investment in the green economy and the green sector. So I had to say this to Mr. Zeenni, and I know he shares these views with me, but just to take it either, public or private, I think is not the right way to do it.
Mr. Zeenni's asked for a right of reply, so I pass the microphone back to him.
Unfortunately, because we don't have enough time, maybe I did not explain exactly what I meant. Considering your ministry, the environmental issues, you know that we are working. I'm not talking about myself, but I'm talking about the sector, the whole sector. Most of the sector is respecting the rules. Everybody is actually with the ISO 14,000 and working on better practices. So definitely we believe in it. I wish regulating is like regulating the environment and all this. No. Mr. Yassin, there is one thing. Yes, you have a problem in the public sector and the employees, the people who work in the private sector. You have a problem in collecting from 30% of the people, of the economic actors in Lebanon, to cover 100% of your expenditures. You cannot continue like that. Either you collect from everybody, or you leave the others work and make business and find new solutions. If we had time, there is plenty of new solutions on the stake. And we have presented a revival plan. I don't talk in the name of the economic associations, but as industrialists, we have presented different plans. We gave it to the government, and they adopted most of it, but unfortunately, it's not working because the original framework that was put in place was refused by everybody, not from us. We believe in the IMF agreement. We want it. But do you know why we want it? Because we want them to control the expenditures later on from the public sector. That's why we want the IMF. It's not only because they are going to give us $3 billion.
Thank you, gentlemen. And I want to say what I like about this robust conversation is that you're both talking about ethics. You're both talking about how it should be in an ideal country with ideal values and proper systems. Unfortunately, we are lacking that in Lebanon, and that is you're both idealistic, which we need, and what we really need to face is how do we get to that state and who is preventing Lebanon from fulfilling your ethics and ensuring our country operates on fundamental values and principles that have been missing for so long.
People are your allies, if I may add. You have allies, people. And since October 2019, things have changed. I believe that people are ready to support, provided you inspire confidence and trust.
Trust.
If they trust you, they are willing to make sacrifices as well.
It's
Yassin is one big example about that.
what I'm going to do, because we don't have a lot of time left, is actually open it up to the audience for any questions right now. Otherwise, we'll continue with a few more questions. But if anyone has questions, yes. Do you have a microphone for our just gentleman at the front here? Thank you. Okay, great.
Hi, my name is Omar Christidis. I'm the founder and CEO of ArabNet. I'll be actually moderating a session later, looking forward to the discussion. I have a question. I work with a lot of investors in the GCC and Lebanese investors, and one of the challenges is while the Lebanese are sending a lot of dollars back to the diaspora is sending dollars back, They're sending them as support for their families. When you talk to them about investing in Lebanon, they actually don't want to invest in Lebanon. They feel overexposed. They feel like this is a lost cause. And so, Your Excellency, you were talking about getting more investment into the private sector in general in the country. How do we convince the diaspora to do this? Sorry?
Who would you like?
Anybody who would answer my question, really.
I think it's a very good question, Omar, and it's a very good point. You know, I think it's the answer is straightforward. We need functioning institutions. You need rule of law. You need stability at the political level. You need the parliament and the government and to be functioning. You need the judiciary to be, supporting all of this. I mean, it's simple. Not at all. Abadan. No. Not at all. No. As a matter of fact, I mean, we all believe we need to build a framework for the rule of law in this country in order to operate at all the facets, whether investment or social, or environmental, and so on. But we need to work on this. And if we actually give up, on this, if we say we don't want to, engage in Lebanon, we don't want any form of cooperation, collaboration, then let's not sit in this dialogue session. As simple as that. This is the key. Key is to put all the framework for good governance, rule of law, and I think Lebanon becomes one of the most attractive places for investment, particularly in some sectors that we need to rebuild from scratch.
Thank you.
Well, the trigger is one word: trust. Investors, whether Lebanese or non-Lebanese, wouldn't put a penny if they don't have enough confidence in the system. The system is about persons as well. So when you offer some sort of trust-oriented people in ruling the country, this would be the trigger. It should start there. Then yes, legislation, and President Zeenni knows very well that we don't really lack legislation. We lack support, specific support to the industry, for instance. So what we do in general is never a long-term plan, right? So it's on a daily changing routine. I do believe in the trigger. I think that we have a lot to do, but it should start somewhere. For instance, investors do not trust the banking system today. New banks would emerge, maybe. We'll see. People don't trust the judiciary, unfortunately, because it's offering a very bad image of itself, not the people. The judiciary itself is showing is giving bad signals. So this is where it should change, mainly.
At the fundamental levels. I'm just going to ask this gentleman. Okay, sorry, I've lost track of where we are. The lady has her microphone. Tfaddali. Rima?
Okay. Hi, so I'm Rima Freji. I'm the president of the Lebanese Private Sector Network. And first of all, thank you for having us here as a network. As we're listening, I have so many thoughts to say. So first, I'm going to complain a little bit and do provide a solution, as everybody's asking for that. So as a private sector, we got together because we feel, first, we're under hostage in a country that has another country inside it, another rule of law, and we're having to fight against all that 70% that Mr. Zeenni is talking about, and that is very difficult to do, to survive. At the same time, our lifeline is cut out, no access to finance. At the same time, the public services don't exist. And so we're trying with all of that. And the solution that we have nagging us is like there's a low-hanging fruit here. With the presence of the refugees in the country, and as a fellow industrialist with Mr. Zeenni, we always ask ourselves, all right, so while all this political indecision is taking place, and while all this deadlock is taking place, there's a small thing we can buy local, buy the international organizations. They need to buy Lebanese products. That will kickstart a lot of factories, that will provide jobs, that will take people out of aid into productivity and make them elect better politicians in the long run. An employed citizen is a good citizen. And as long as we're in this loop of aid and poverty, we're actually impacting the culture and we're impacting our community and limiting the potential growth of the economy, which we believe is in the hands of the private sector. And one last thing, Your Excellency, rather than focusing on those few private sector members that are not lawful, not environmentally conscious, let's just fix the regulations. Because the other 70%, nobody even goes near them. We only focus on the large brands, the large organizations as ministries, and I'm sorry if I have to say this because I personally had that example, that experience, but we don't focus on that 70%. So hiding and being shy to talk about the real issues in the country, we should stop doing that first and foremost. We need to sell the organizations that, and they need to buy local to feed the refugees, to house the refugees, this is one. And we need to stop being ashamed of talking about the hostage situation in the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Rima. We're going to take a few more questions because we've run out of time, but the gentleman over here, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Daizy. My name is Christian Hanold. I am an expert for the European relations with the neighborhood. And Lebanon is part of the southern neighborhood and has an association agreement with the EU. And Minister Nasser, I wanted to ask you, because you have been focusing on trade, and I think trade is a very important issue because Europe is the main economic and trade partner for Lebanon, much more than 60 or 70%, I think. So there is potential. What potential do you see to increase the framework, or that the framework of trade with the EU is in a different shape, so that that the business of Lebanon can progress and create more jobs? That's the first point. And the second one is, I may suggest, because I also see the potential, especially in the southern Mediterranean partner countries, for green partnerships, for investment in green technologies and in green development. The first EU partnership in this field is with Morocco. What can we learn from that? Do you see things like this? You know, there's also with Tunisia, and I think that Lebanon should look also to Morocco and Tunisia to see what can we copy from them, what can we profit in order to promote green partnerships. Thank you.
Minister.
First to Rima, I fully support you in your drive to buy local. I think we actually in government, we're very conscious about this. We discuss it with the World Food Program and others, that this is very important to, but it's not only the 70% of small and medium enterprises who are not respecting the regulation. It's also the big ones with multi-billion dollars or multi-million dollars investment, including the cement industry for that matter. Let's also face our demons, Rima. So again, I don't want to keep the discussion on this, but it's something we need to definitely not shy of debating and dialogue and doing this dialogue about, and I'm fully agree with you. We need to face a lot of our challenges by this open dialogue in order to, as Minister Baroud mentioned, to rebuild trust. On the EU neighborhood, and that's actually also addresses some of the concerns that Rima mentioned. So thank you, Christian, for raising this. Agriculture and agro-industry is, a great potential for Lebanon. The reason for not being able to enter new markets, given that it's more competitive now in Lebanon, is actually because of the practices that exist in this sector for many, many years. I mean, I cannot clean the nitrates in the soil in central Biqa that has been injected by overuse of pesticides for the last 20 years in 1 year or 12 months or 9 months. It will require years of reforming practices in a lot of fields, including the agriculture and agro-industry, that actually to fulfill them to compete in European markets or in the GCC or in other more developed markets. This is unfortunately what's happening. This is when we talk about regulation, reforms, and guidelines. If you go to some GCC countries, some smart farmers in Lebanon have managed to do so by looking for or working on sustainable, measures in agriculture. So 1 kilogram of mountain tomatoes, we call it, Banadura Jabaliyi tomatoes, is actually more than $11 in Doha at the moment. That's actually documented. It's not something I'm saying as fiction. So this is way more than what the local market can give or can offer for this one simple product. And you can actually take it for a lot of high quality products that Lebanon can give if they adhere to standards that can compete. And I remember here the story or experience of the Dutch embassy that actually they worked hard for many years to get the potatoes from Akkar to Amsterdam. Just to give an example. And they did a lot of training and follow-up and capacity building to improve the practices of big farmers of potato on the plains of Akkar. And it was very, challenging. They barely made some products that can enter the European market because of the right standards that exist around pesticides, residues, and so on and so forth. So this is when I go back to say the private sector as well needs to work on those guidelines with the public sector. This is the synergy that we need to do in order actually to move from the practices that used to exist in the economy in the past 20 or 30 years. This is the right step. If I manage to get my potatoes or my cucumber to London or Amsterdam or Brussels or Berlin, this is a success.
Thank you, Minister. I'm going to butt in. Is there any final words? Because we've run out of time. I know. Okay, please. Sorry. Yes.
Thank you for the opportunity to give a question, because I learned about some problems of Lebanon in the last days, and there are some problems that are really complicated and not easy to resolve, but there are others that are easy to resolve because of another decision of the decision makers, of politicians. And I was really surprised to hear that you're a democracy, but you are not able to organize an election on the municipal level. So it's very, very crude to me to hear this. And I didn't quite understand what the reason is, because is it true that your public budget is not enough, has not enough money to pay paper and pencils and salaries for those who spend a day and count the votes? That's not so complicated. So, and I think election is the first step in a democracy. And if you fail to do this in May, you will lose confidence of your citizens totally, the rest of the confidence. And so I want to really appeal to you to do this. Yeah? It has to be done because you are a democracy and not a failed state. And the other thing is, you have to elect your president. And there are 4 people on this podium, and there are many people here in this room who could be a president. So it's not so difficult to find one. And there's one thing I want to mention. I didn't hear one name of a woman in this leading position. So you might think about that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Mr. Zeenni. No, I'm going to ask Ziad. Do you want to respond specifically to the municipalities?
I will respond.
Okay. Tfaddal.
Just one word. Concerning women, we just heard Ms. Rima Freiji. I think she has outspoken. Well, Asma, you are more than president. No, we are just joking. But you asked me about what can we do with the Germans and the gentleman about investing in Lebanon. We are investing in Lebanon. Maybe we are stuck in Lebanon. It's not being stuck. We took this choice. We are investing and reinvesting. The only problem that we are facing, and Rima mentioned, is the access to finance, actually. With the collapse of the banking system and all the systems that are here in Lebanon, This is the biggest problem, actually. We can take care to bring our economy back, but we need also finance. Sorry, thank you.
That's
Sorry.
okay, thank you. Ziad?
Yes, there's a joke. Gender equality would happen when you will find incompetent women in office. Because, you know, I'm sorry to put it as a joke. Of course, I don't believe that this is the case. And I believe that women empowered in office is also the job of men. So the day when men would really support women, that's when it's not only about women organizations, it's about men believing that this is how it should be done. Now, the presidency is not about the person. I believe that we're unable to elect a president, not because we're not finding someone who can do it. It's more about the mission, what he or she would be able to do. The mission of the upcoming president is more important than his or her person. Municipal elections, democracy, yes, and this is why many political groups wouldn't like to see democracy working properly, because it would mean that the clientelism they have would not be there anymore. And it's a popular thing. We should be committed to elections, because municipal elections were not a surprise. We knew for a fact 2 years ago, 6 years ago, that in May 2022 we should have done elections. Okay, in 2022 we had at the same time parliamentary elections. The government said, I cannot organize both. It's controversial. We can discuss this. I'm one of those who believe that it should have been done at the same time in May 2022. But today, money is not an excuse, because we had our budget law. And in the budget law, it should have been very clear that we're going to municipal elections and put the money that is needed in the budget in order to organize elections. So I can say it's not innocent. It's not innocent. It's something that is really prepared, and people should react. I believe that people should react, and very quickly.
If you allow me, just 1 minute, just to clarify.
I've gotten the wind up a few times.
You know, Madam, we managed to, just to answer the question, we managed as a government to fulfill our promise, and we did the parliamentary election last May. And of course, as Mr. Baroud mentioned, I fully agree, and I was one of those who argued we should do municipal and parliamentary election at the same time. But let's put the realities around them. The collapse of the currency is unprecedented. We lost almost 98.5% of the value of the Lebanese pound. So there is an issue of money. It's not like the budget of Lebanon now is less than $800 million. This is the budget for the whole country. It used to be, I think, around $16 million, if I'm not mistaken. $16 billion.
Billion.
So, $60 million, sorry. So, what we're saying, $16 billion. What we're saying now, it's the $800 million of the Lebanese budget is equivalent to the budget of the American University of Beirut, only one institution. The collapse of this is going to have its implication and weight on everything. So some mayors here and the heads of unions, they know. They used to have around $1 million budget. It's now less than $10,000. So yes, there is an issue of finance. There's an issue of administration. There are logistics issues that we need to do them. We should go and do the municipal election as soon as we can. But given the situation, it's not a conspiracy around it. I think there are more deep issues concerning around the administration and the ability to do so.
Gentlemen, I'm going to close this session. This is a conversation. Go on,
very brief.
Go on. Make a statement.
My name is Asma Zain. I represent many civil society associations and different NGOs. Today I'm here as Lebanese League for Women in Business. I want to answer Elizabeth on her comments. I commend you on what you said, but you have to know we are a sectarian country. We are not a democracy at all. We brag about it, but we are definitely not a democracy. In answer to His Excellency, my friend, Dr. Nasser Yassin, I want to tell you, yes, we need to support the public, what do you call them, islands of excellence. And I have to tell you that 100% of those islands of excellence are directed and managed by women. And those we should support for sure. And this is I'm saying it out of knowledge, not because. And nobody mentioned here today the role of the civil society. The role of the civil society that was magnificent, impressive, and Dr. Nasser was with us before becoming a minister. So I want you to leave ministry and get back to us. So the civil society is a shining, active group that has been and is still maintaining excellent activities. We work closely with the private sector, and I have to add here, yes, I agree with Dr. Nasser that many of the big companies, they avoid being transparent and under governance, but there is a say in Arabic, I want you to translate it, Dr. Nasser, الصالح بعزة الطالح. يعني you are applying taxes on the transparent big companies that are abiding by rules and regulations as any other company working with no transparency. I want to ask His Excellency, Mr. Baroud, can we elect municipality without president? It cannot be done, right? Thank you.
You know, it's controversial, and it's what I'm going to say is only a point of view. My reading is the following. Having a president is highly important, but at the same time, we have precedents when it took us 2.5 years to elect a president. Do you stop everything in the meantime? I don't know. I know for a fact that we need to have a president as soon as possible, yesterday, but in October, September, last September. But do we really, can we really give people this bad signal about not having vacancy in the presidency and vacancy in municipalities? Ask the mayors, how would they perform if we don't have an extension? Mukhtars, I mean, they would really, we will have an issue. We have a situation where it won't be controllable anymore. But at the same time, we should not neglect electing a president. This is highly important. This is highly urgent.
Panelists, I'm apologize for going over time, but I didn't want to limit the conversation. It's very important. And I again want to thank everyone for being quiet. We have a room that actually listened, and it's very rare that you find that in conferences these days, but this was an important discussion. Thank you again, Michael. Thank you, Konrad Adenauer-Stiftung, and thank you, panelists. It's been a very engaging conversation. We need to build the vision for Lebanon. I think we have a lot of people, minds and spirits in this room, intelligence, but we don't have a vision for Lebanon. I think we need to bring all parties together to drive the vision for the future, because that is what I find very lacking, and doesn't provide trust, doesn't provide a hope, and it doesn't set a basis for belief in what can be for our future. So I'll leave you with that on that note, and thank you again.